Dear colleagues, dear guests, please take seats. We will slowly start our event. It paid off, obviously, to wait a few minutes. We have more guests now. Thank you for coming. Welcome, everyone. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Stanisław Kistryn. I am Rector's Proxy for cooperation within Una Europa. I am, at that function for already almost 6 years, and I am very pleased that I can be kind of a moderator, not host, moderator of this session. First, let me once again welcome all of you very warmly. I will come to the Una.Lecture series later on, but before that, let me welcome and give word to the host of the building here of the faculty, the Dean of the Faculty of International and Political Studies, Professor Piotr Bajor. Please take the stage.
Thank you very much. The hosting institution is, of course, Jagielloński University. So let me, on behalf of our faculty, warmly welcome you during this event. So dear rectors, dear professors, dear students, and dear participants of this very important event, which is the lecture delivered by Professor Bartosz Brożek about creativity. On behalf of the authorities of the Faculty of International and Political Studies, I would like to very warmly welcome you during this session, during this lecture, which will be dedicated, as I mentioned, creativity, which is a very important topic, very important issue in universities nowadays, which is, of course, a very important issue for the research and other aspects of activities at our university. Despite of my general welcome, I would like to also welcome the representatives of the Una Europa universities and diplomats from countries of Balkan countries and Eastern Europe who are the participating of the special program of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Enlargement Academy. I'm very happy that you joined us today, and then we'll also have opportunity to talk about the creativity, which is also the very important issue in the implementation of diplomacy, specifically nowadays in current circumstances of international relations. Today's lecture, as I mentioned, is about creativity. I create, therefore I fail. Very. It's not a funny topic. It's a very important topic. Of course, creativity, as I mentioned, is an issue which should be on the level at our table of our work, of course, not only from the research perspective, but also from our spectrum of activities at our university, and for didactics as well, but also from the perspective of administrative issues. So I'm very happy that recently our university has implementation policy in support of creativity in our projects, our activities, and I would like to mention that it was thanks also to cooperation with our partners university in the network of Una Europa. So thank you very much for that. And as well, another part is the result of implementation of special program EDUP, Excellence University. Excellence Initiative Research University. Thanks to this program, we prepared a lot of solutions for projects aimed of what was to stimulate creativity. For example, creation of special collaboration spaces. One of the spaces also is located here at our faculty. I'm very happy that this space is a place where the students can work in the perspective of implementation, the policy of creativity, and can implement projects together with the partners from our external stakeholders in the aim of solving the problems from the social life. So this is very important, and I'm I'm very happy that this policy is implemented by our university, and of course we can support of it. At our faculty, the Faculty of International Political Studies, also we are trying to continue this policy which was implemented by our former dean, Professor Paweł Laidler, current Vice-Rector for Educational Affairs. We prepared here at the faculty level special programs for scholars, for students, which the aims is a cooperation with our external partners, but also with the component of creativity. So this is a very productive program with the practical results, and we are very happy that we can continue now and support such of initiatives. I'm sure that today's lecture, which will be given by Professor by Rector Bartosz Brożek, will be very important platform for discussion of the creativity for universities, but of course for us will be the impulse, will be also the good opportunity to find creativity in ourselves, which could be used in our activities at university. And this is what I wish to us as a result of this lecture. And once again, I would like to very warmly welcome you to the Faculty of International Political Studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Bajor, for this introduction, and welcoming all the participants, also for this quick overview of the different activities within Una Europa, Excellence Initiative, and all stuff. Thank you very much. Before going to the subject, let me just say a few words from my side. Just maybe a few people here know that I am deeply attached to this very room because some 45 or maybe 47 years ago, just in the final row, there was an inauguration of the academic year, and some student of physics just entered the walls of university. That was me. I never expected that I will progress to being doctor, professor, then Vice-Rector for research, and finally coordinating activities of Una Europa and others. So for the students here, you don't know, and the future is bright ahead of us. You don't know what will be in 40 years from now. You will be directors, rectors, presidents, or whatever. Happy people anyhow. Of course, I am physicist. I am not, I have nothing to do with political studies. Previously, this building was the home of Faculty of Physics and Mathematics, later on with Physics and Astronomy. Now, this event today is a cyclic event, not periodic. I am physicist, so I know what is the difference. It is a cycle event in which universities of Una Europa try to address issues which are very important for present day world and society. To make it popular and make it digestible by not only academic audience, but by everyone essentially, we try to engage top-level experts who can talk about complicated issues in a manner which is really easy to understand and to comprehend. Therefore, we will have this eminent lecturer, Professor Bartosz Brożek, today. I would be perfectly able to tell a few words about Una Europa, but I think it is much better that the authorities of the university do it, and therefore I ask my friend Professor Paweł Laidler, now Vice-Rector for Education, to also tell a few words about Una Europa, if you please.
Like this better. Okay. Dear rectors, dear dean, dear professors, dear distinguished guests, dear students, dear members of Una Europa Alliance, it's a great honor for me to see a room packed plus a lot of people in an online mode, listening to the future, to the discussion about the future of universities, the future of students, but also the future of Europe. Professor Kistryn asked me to talk about history. This is a little bit risky because the first historical reference, which I wanted to refer to, and I just have 2 or 3 minutes, that's what they told me, is 1950s and the idea of one Europe. However, because we don't have much time and you all are aware of at least the consequences of the initiatives that happened among Monnet, Schumann, and many others, I'm not aware whether their discussions and their debates were referring at that time of this type of collaboration that European Union allows us today. We are very proud and very happy as the Jagiellonian University to be part of an alliance of 11 universities. This is not just an alliance. The whole idea behind Una Europa is an idea of an open European university. This is an idea that no matter where you are enrolled, you need to feel the identity of certain values which we all share. You need to feel the possibility that mobility brings us. You need to be aware of the fact that it's not only nowadays Western Europe, but also Central Eastern Europe being involved in sharing the same values not only referring to who we are or how we became where we are. We value history, but above all, it's about future. When you look into the number of projects that are organized within Una Europa, you realize that all of them are devoted to creating a future university. Therefore, such topics as digitalization, artificial intelligence, communication in the 21st century, the issues of internationalization and multidisciplinarity, not only as rhetorical creations, but as a real perspective and a way to deepen creative thinking of our students. This is our mission. I'm very proud to notice that the Jagiellonian University is not only, formally part of this alliance, but also that we are actively involved in realization of several projects. Some of these projects are purely didactical. There are at least 2 important programs. One already launched, the second one will be launched in the next academic year, which prove, despite cultural differences, educational differences, and legal differences, that it is possible to create a joint BA program which refers to very important issues of today and tomorrow. BA in European Studies and BA in Sustainability. This is not the only areas we are talking about undergraduate programs. Also, we have options for postgraduates, PhD in Cultural Heritage. And all of these topics allow us also to share a lot of research perspective among our professors, among doctoral students, and among the students. I'm very happy also to notice that the students of the Jagiellonian University have been very actively involved in the operation of student board, the body of the representation of students of the 11 universities. Therefore, I would like to thank all of the students who are having the mission of uniting, integrating, and strengthening the ties among the student body, because that initiative has been created for the students. I would like to thank, especially individually, Ms. Natalia Szymańska for an important organizational input, but also, which is very important, you are already aware of the fact, I would like to thank Rector Professor Stanisław Kistryn. Well, I don't know if they call you Mr. Una Europa, but definitely you are a person, among all other successes, who had a huge impact on the establishment, on help in establishment, the alliance here at the Jagiellonian University. And thank you very much for this. There's no coincidence. We are not only inviting for the lectures top lecturers and peoples with vision, but also people who are directly responsible for the strength of Una Europa. Rector Professor Bartosz Brożek is a person whose vision and strategy has a huge impact on several projects which are organized within the Alliance. And I'm very happy that he will take the floor in a minute and refer in a more substantial manner to the topic which connects Una Europa. I would like to thank the Dean. Thank you for hosting us here at the Faculty of International and Political Studies. But also I would like to thank, and it's not my reference to the Jagiellonian, but also to all other universities. There wouldn't be a success of any alliance, any network, any other form of collaboration without the help of administrative officers. We are aware of the fact that very often it's a very challenging thing. It's not only going abroad or sitting in front of the computer and chatting with friends from other universities. No, these are several challenges, legal challenges, administrative challenges, the idea of exchanging good practices. That is what you are doing, and you are the very heart of this alliance. I would like to wish you not only a great journey to the issues of creativity with Professor Brożek, but this idea that became one day One Europe, which was community at the beginning and today is European Union, also the initiative, the idea of united Europe in the academia perspective, fighting for the same values and sharing the same values. Let's wish for us all that the future of the universities is bright, because the future is Una Europa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rector Laidler. Thank you, Paweł. Great words. I always envy Paweł in fluency in English. It's not far above mine, but I hope you understand me. These lectures are, as I say, a cycle. You can find the recordings from the previous events on YouTube under the headline of Una.Lecture. So also I must warn you that, well, the guys here are recording us, so behave, not at the lecture also. Before I give the floor to Bartosz, let me say a few words about him. After the lecture, of course, I hope that Bartosz will allow also for a few questions if there are some. I have the pleasure to introduce this important for Una Europa and for Jagiellonian University person. Bartosz is jurist and philosopher in one. He holds PhD in philosophy and in law. He's author of many monographs, I think more than 20 monographs and more than 70 scientific papers. He's really one of the brightest persons I ever met. And I am happy that I can call Bartosz also my friend. He holds a number of awards, which I always forgot, which so from National Science Center, Ministry, Prime Minister, Foundation, Politica Foundation, von Humboldt Foundation, and the list is still longer. He, as Paweł was mentioning, was really substantial in creating directions for Una Europa when we work together, and also for the Excellence Initiative, which Dean Piotr also mentioned. That's really achievements of Bartosz to introducing kind of high-level think tank, Future Unilab, to both Una Europa and to Excellence Initiative at the Jagiellonian University. From my point of view, I am really happy that Bartosz, as I said, I can call him a very trustful friend, and was maybe not always easy to contact. He used not to respond to emails, but after some pressure, he usually is ready to work together. Just before the lecture, we talked that he is training his assertiveness on me and in rejecting certain proposals, but he is failing. So I hope that he will be failing in future and engage in many things. So I hope to learn, as all of you, how we can be more creative and to find a failure as an inherent factor of being creative. Bartosz, please teach us something.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's been a great pleasure to hear those words. I hope that at least some of them were true. Unlike Staszek, I'm not very much attached to this particular room. I think it's the second time I'm here. However, it is true that, like Staszek, I'm very much attached to Una Europa, because from the almost very beginning of the alliance, I have tried to contribute something to the establishment of this alliance, and I never thought I would be standing in front of the Una Europa crowd and other guests delivering Una.Lecture. So thank you for this opportunity. Another confession is that I do not know a lot about creativity, I'm afraid. I don't know whether anyone knows how creative processes take place, what exactly are the mechanisms behind creativity. However, I believe that I do know a lot about failure, mistakes and errors. These are the things that I commit on a regular basis. And what I want to do today is to try to show you that there is no creativity without a room, a safe space for committing errors, mistakes, and for failing. If we want to be creative, it may happen, but it will happen much more often if we allow ourselves to be wrong. In order to persuade you that this indeed is the case, I will offer a kind of quite general philosophical argument, but quite deeply rooted in the research in the cognitive sciences, evolutionary sciences, and so on. So if we ask this question, who's afraid of failure, and we are the people of the academia, we would probably reply everyone. Professors are afraid to fail, at least in the eyes of the rectors, deans, or their peers. Students are afraid to fail in the eyes of their teachers. Professional staff members we are afraid to fail, but we shouldn't be. Failure is, as I will try to show, something without which we can never become creative. And the argument to show this runs as follows. I will start by asking a question, how culture is possible. I know this seems quite distant from the topic, but I will try to persuade you that once we understand how culture is generated, how it is possible that we are the only species that has been able to do science, created literature, music, and so on and so on. Once we understand this, we will understand what is the role of failure, of mistake and error in the creative processes. Then I will also try to show you that there are deeply rooted mechanisms in our minds which make it quite difficult for us to accept that we can fail, to accept that we can make a mistake, to offer something which deviates from the established patterns of doing things. In other words, I will try to show you that the difficulty we have in accepting failure and error as something which is the very essence of the creative process, the difficulty lies in evolutionary, in mental mechanisms that evolution has equipped us with. However, in the third part of this lecture, I will try to show that indeed, in order to do anything innovative, we must be open to making mistakes. That this is really the only way to do something new. And this I will try to inscribe into a more general framework of our understanding of rationality and what does it mean to be rational in life. And I will try to show that human culture, everything we do, every innovative step, every addition to our culture is made possible by already an evolutionary mechanism of variation and selection. And this will lead me to my final point, in which I will try to rethink, or at least offer some food for thought, when it comes to rethinking the role and place of universities. I will try to show you that universities are places which should provide the society with variation, with a lot of different ways of responding to the challenges we have, to the problems we encounter. And most of those ways will be mistakes or errors, will not work. But without the system, without giving university or the people working at universities the space for making mistakes, we are really losing from our side what is the essence of university. So let me start with the first point, which is the question of how culture is possible. And the heading for this part of the lecture is Out-aping the apes. Indeed, the human beings are much better and imitating than any other primates. And it all starts with a puzzle which a famous evolutionary scientist and psychologist, Michael Tomasello, encapsulates in the following words. The 6 million years that separates human beings from other great apes is a very short time evolutionarily. Our problem is thus one of time. The fact is, there has simply not been enough time for normal processes of biological evolution involving genetic variation and natural selection to have created, one by one, each of the cognitive skills necessary for modern humans to invent and maintain complex tool-use industries and technologies, complex forms of symbolic communication and representation, and complex social organizations and institutions. There is only one possible solution to this puzzle. That is, there is only one known biological mechanism that could bring about these kinds of changes in behavior and cognition in so short a time. This biological mechanism is social or cultural transmission, which works on the time scales many orders of magnitude faster than those of organic evolution. So what Tomasello says here is that when we look at the genetic material, the difference in the genetic material between humans and other non-human primates, the difference is so small that it does not account for this huge difference in the cultures we have. We may say that chimpanzees or bonobos do have some cultures. I may come back to this issue in a moment, but it is nothing when compared to the very complex human culture. From the biological point of view, the difference between our species is extremely small. So the small biological difference must account for some kind of mechanism that makes this cultural difference such a big one. And according to Tomasello and other evolutionary scholars, the difference lies with the fact that the humans, when compared to other species, are imitation machines. We are born to imitate. The kind of imitation that humans exhibit is non-discriminative. It means that we, from a very young age, almost newborns, start imitate other members of our species. So parents, peers, and so on and so on. This imitation is not only conscious. In most cases, it is unconscious. And the studies show that indeed our ability and tendency to imitate starts very early in our development and really continues throughout our lives. To show you the difference between what humans and other primates do when they learn from others, one needs to distinguish between what is sometimes called imitation sensu stricta and emulation. Imitation sensu stricte is imitating not only the goal of the action, but also the means, the exact behavior leading to this action. So for instance, if I want to peel off an apple, there is a goal to have this apple skinless, but there may be different methods to do that. You can do it in one way or another. When humans imitate, they imitate not only the goal to have the apple skinless, but they imitate the method, exactly the method. Other non-human primates, usually if they do some kind of imitation, it's only in relation to the goal and not to the method. Why this is important? This is important because imitation sensu stricte, so the one which refers to both the means and end, gives us a number of benefits. Of course, it may or it comes with some shortcomings or disadvantages. For instance, when we start imitating the exact method someone does something, and this is not a good method to do it, we may not reach the goal. So we may start imitating bad patterns, behavioral patterns. But because we concentrate not only on the goal of the action, but also on the method of the action, some very interesting things happen from the evolutionary perspective. First of all, this is something which helps to accumulate knowledge. So once someone discovers in one way or another a behavioral pattern, a way of doing something, because younger representatives of our species learn by imitation, we start imitating the way people do it. So this method of doing something, the behavioral pattern, is passed on from generation to generation. So in this way, we accumulate knowledge. Secondly, because we concentrate on both the mean and the end, we can recombine them. For instance, we can start using the same word to do other things, to communicate something else, to reach a different communicational goal. Because we concentrate in our imitation activities on the behavioral patterns, we may think of modifying those patterns. If the only goal of imitation is to have the same change in the environment, to reach the same goal, there is no way of changing the behavioral patterns or thinking about it even. But because we imitate sensu stricte, so we, in our imitation, both conscious and unconscious behavior, we concentrate on both the pattern and the goal, we can think of changing those patterns slightly, for instance. And finally, because we concentrate on those behavioral patterns, they may become quite fine-grained, I would say. So if we think of language, in language there are words which are very close, so they sound almost identical. These are the differences between those two behavioral patterns. When we have two very similar words, the difference is minimal. However, those words may mean something completely different and may serve completely different communicational purposes. If we were not able to imitate, if we did not have the tendency and ability to imitate, this would never happen. Because of this mechanism of social learning, through imitation sensu stricte, we've been able to develop, for instance, language. So a system of tools for communicating in which the difference between the different behavioral patterns, the different words or phrases we use, is minimal. So these are fine-grained behavioral patterns. So basically, this is the way, of course, speaking from an extremely general evolutionary perspective, this is the way in which we create culture. Somehow we come up with some behavioral patterns in response to the challenges we meet in our environment. And once someone discovers, I will come back to the issue what that means, a way of dealing with a kind of problem that we encounter in the environment, and a behavioral pattern is established, and this is passed on to the next generation, sometimes modified to an extent, sometimes used to achieve different aims, but pass on from generation to generation, accumulating knowledge and building culture. So this is the basic mechanism of creating culture. Now, as I said, evolution has equipped us with other mechanisms, which, when combined with our ability and tendency to imitate, make what we may call creativity quite difficult. In particular, we have a number of mental mechanisms which are well summarized by René Descartes when, for instance, in the Meditations on the First Philosophy, he speaks of our longing, our need to be certain, to find unshakable foundations of our knowledge of what we know about the world. This is the famous passage from Descartes where he says, "Several years have now elapsed since I first became aware that I had accepted, even from my youth, many false opinions for true, and that consequently what I afterward based on such principles was highly doubtful. And from that time, I was convinced of the necessity of undertaking once in my life to rid myself of all the opinions I had adopted and of commencing anew the work of building from the foundation, if I desired to establish a firm and abiding superstructure in the sciences." So what Descartes says here is, in fact, he expresses our longing for an unshakable foundation. So we want to be certain. Of course, this is a philosophical argument, but my claim is that this is an expression of a feeling or a need that is very deeply rooted in the human biology. For some reason, we want an unshakable foundation. We want to be certain. So the problem with this longing for a foundation is that, as especially the philosophy of science of the 20th century showed us, there is no such thing in all or most of the sciences. Some people claim that mathematics is an exception, but some people claim that mathematics is not really a science. This is a discussion we should not enter into right now. But the philosophy of science of the 20th century showed that science, so a place when you would instinctively look as a place where you can have those unshakable foundations, something established for good, never to be changed. So the 20th century showed that this is not the case. If we have in science some certainty, it's only to a degree. All our scientific theories are hypotheses. So, for instance, the ideas expressed by the philosophers belonging to the so-called Vienna Circle, who believed that there are the so-called observational sentences. So the sentences that we just make an observation, we report it, and this is surely true. Nothing can undermine this report. And from this, you can build scientific theories. This was only an illusion. This was a kind of utopia. Like with others, the famous German mathematician David Hilbert believed that at some point in time we will come up with the so-called equations of the world. So you have mathematical equations from which everything will follow. And there are many examples of philosophers, physicists, mathematicians who believed in those unshakable foundations. This, unfortunately, proved not to be possible. To be rational is a very difficult thing. To be rational does not mean to look for unshakable foundations or for things which are surely true, and from them, on the basis of some rules of inference, end up with laws of science or some hypotheses which cannot be undermined. To be rational means to be on the thin red line between foundationalism, so looking for a foundation, we can never find those foundations. But if we want to be rational, we cannot also go in the other direction and say that everything is equally acceptable. To say that anything goes. So to be rational means to be in the middle of either looking for unshakable foundations or saying that everything is equally acceptable or equally good. This is difficult because, as I said a few minutes ago, evolution has equipped us with a number of mental mechanisms which make us look for those unshakable foundations. Some of them are mentioned here. Epistemic emotions, the so-called need for cognitive closure, or various group pressures. For instance, in the recent 20 or 30 years, psychologists say a lot about the so-called epistemic emotions. And the question they posed initially was the following. What is the benefit for an organism like a human being to engage in a very tiresome, energy-consuming effort to build a scientific theory? Sometimes it takes years. It's never a simple thing. What is the benefit? Really, the benefit to engage in this may be something that will happen in 50 years, that we are, on the basis of the theory, able to build something new, some kind of new machine, or I don't know. It may be the Nobel Prize, but the Nobel Prize never comes, almost never comes. And if it does, it's always years after someone started their scientific or research endeavor. So there must be something which makes us enter into those time and energy consuming activities when the benefit, the reward is immediate. And the answer is that these are the epistemic emotions. There are some negative epistemic emotions. We do not understand something, we feel confusion, disorientation, especially when we encounter a kind of contradiction or incompatibility in our perception, in our experience of the world. And then when something changes in our minds, we suddenly understand something. So for instance, form a hypothesis explaining what we have experienced. We have a positive emotion, revelation, amusement, and other such emotions. And this is the reward. So in fact, what stands behind our efforts to build science, but not only science. In every day, I don't know, you may experience a kind of disorientation or anxiety when thinking about what to wear the next day in the evening for a big ball or some other special occasion. This is also an epistemic emotion. You don't know what to wear, how to behave, what to speak of during Una.Lecture, and so on and so on. And then you come up with a theory, really, with a hypothesis. And if this fits together with what you know about the world and your goals, and so on, you may experience a positive emotion, like, I will speak about creativity. Or I will speak about failure. This may be interesting for the audience. This is also constructing a theory. It's not only in physics or biology or whenever. So the driving force behind our cognitive activities are emotions. But please observe that those emotions work in such a way that we want to get rid of the anxiety, of the disorientation, of the confusion. It is not easy for us to stay throughout a prolonged period of time anxious or disoriented. So emotions, negative emotions, this is something we instinctively want to get rid of, to change them, transform them into the positive emotions. So this is a mechanism behind our cognitive activities, but this is a mechanism that makes us act quickly, not wait, to consider all the options, balance different possible scenarios, or compare all the possible hypotheses. Because this is an emotional mechanism, we want to do it quickly. So this is something which makes rationality difficult. Because if these are the emotions that drive our cognitive activities, it basically means that it will be difficult to consider everything, to give due time to the problem that we have encountered. I may. Okay, another mechanism which makes being rational quite difficult is another mechanism that makes us cognitive conservatists, that we tend to quite quickly decide what is the best solution to a problem and then stick to this solution, not wanting to revise our worldview, revise the theories we accept. And these are various aspects of social identity and group pressure. When psychologists started speaking about social identity in the 1970s, they quickly realized that some of the most powerful forces that shape our interactions in the society are all the pressures that are exercised on us by the group. And there are at least two kinds of rules that govern groups. The so-called cooperation rules, these are the rules that help us to do things together. That, for instance, we establish that someone will be a leader of the given group and will have the authority to give orders or decide what to do in what order. Without this, we would not be able to join our efforts in realizing a goal, solving a puzzle, solving a problem. But there are also the so-called adjustment rules. These are the rules which do not directly influence our joint actions, but which make us to abide or become more and more similar to the other members of our group. When you are like Rector Laidler, a big fan of Wisła Kraków, which is one of the two best football teams in Krakow, the other being Hutnik Kraków, don't worry. Then at least once a week you wear those strange things with, you have something here. It's like a kind of, what are the colors of Wisła? Red? What? Yes, indeed. Red, white, and blue. Why does he do it? He's a reasonable man. He does it because he wants to belong to a group. He is a member. He is adjusted to that group. But this is a mechanism which works in every kind of group. Think about the groups we have at universities. Think about our peers working in the same field of science. Think about people working in embassies. Yeah? You have your own culture. You have your own ways of behavior. If you want to belong to the group, you need to do some things and never do other things. These are very powerful forces which makes us to repeat what has been discovered before. It's very difficult to do something new within a group. If you want to belong to a group, if you want to be identified with a group, whether it's supporters of a football club, people working in the same field of science, people living in the same city, people belonging to the same country, or people of the same nationality. These are all things which contribute to our cognitive conservatism. So now see what we have here. We have a culture creating mechanism which is based on imitation, so repeating what others do. And we have very strong mental mechanism the evolution has equipped us with, which make the repetition of the already established behavioral patterns almost a necessity. This is good for us because we do not want to have negative cognitive emotions. If so, we want to solve a problem as quickly as possible in accordance to the rules we already know. We want to feel good, we want to belong to a group. Therefore, we will not deviate from those patterns, whether they pertain to supporting football clubs or working in the field of cognitive science, for instance. So these are very powerful forces that only strengthen the mechanism of social learning by imitation. Where is the space for creativity? Is there any space for creativity? The person in the picture is a Polish microbiologist and philosopher of science of Jewish origin, Ludwig Fleck, who lived in the 20th century. And he did a lot of interesting work in microbiology. He also did quite revolutionary work in the philosophy of science. His ideas predated some of similar ideas of the famous Thomas Kuhn, the author of The Structure of Scientific Revolution. But I will not speak about Fleck's idea of science as our joint endeavor, not something individual people do, but what communities of scientists do. I will concentrate on only one of his claims. Maybe I will leave this, sorry. On the claim that in order to do something new, to discover something new, to be creative and innovative, you need to commit an error. That error is the only way in which we can create something. Because when we recall the two mechanisms I spoke of, so the mechanism of social learning through imitation, and those deeply rooted psychological mechanisms which are responsible for our intellectual inertia and for our cognitive conservatism. Then it seems that this famous saying, Latin saying, nihil novi sub sole, nothing new under the sun, is just true. So we can create really nothing new because we just repeat what others have already done. How to introduce a novelty into our culture? Well, we can at least theoretically do it in one or of two ways. We can do it through a conscious effort. So we can sit in our armchair and start thinking of, well, what can I change in, I don't know, legal philosophy, or what can I change in quantum mechanics? How can I introduce a change here? So maybe this is possible. I don't know really how, but maybe. Or through chance. This is quite often referred to as this phenomenon of serendipity, that something happens by accident and we recognize suddenly that this helps us to understand better the world, to solve a problem we could not have solved before, and so on and so on. But neither of those two ways that we can think of introducing something new, so through a conscious effort or through chance, is the same as making a change in culture, contributing something new, generating something creative through error. This just does not add up. However, as I said, Fleck says discovery is thus inextricably interwoven with what is known as error. How? So I think, I don't know whether I can persuade you to accept this view, but I think that if we remember what are the culture creating mechanisms, then we can say that a conscious effort to introduce something new is really a conscious effort to make a mistake. It's a conscious effort to deviate from the established behavioral patterns and recognize this new way, this deviation, as something useful. And the same happens in the case of serendipity. This is a recognition that an observation, which is a kind of error because it deviates from our cognitive predictions, is useful. So if the basic method of sustaining culture is through imitation, is through repetition, is through doing the same things all the time, the introduction of anything new is really an error. So this is making an error in the process of repetition and imitation. Without that, I cannot see how creativity would be possible. Creativity is really only another name for the fact that we do mistakes while repeating whatever belongs to or has belonged to culture so far. If this is all true, then culture indeed develops when humans make mistakes and recognize them as useful. And if so, then it means that cultural evolution is indeed an evolution as it proceeds through variation and selection. Variation in biological evolution occurs when there is a mistake in replicating the DNA sequence. And here also, variation is something which happens when we make a mistake in imitating a behavioral pattern. I think it's too long. I've been speaking too long, yeah? So quite quickly now. Okay, a few questions towards the end of this lecture. If we want to be original thinkers, if we want to contribute something really new to science, should we go for quantity or quality? Should we write as many scientific papers as possible or concentrate on our best ideas? What do you think? Quality. Who says quantity? Quantity, very good. The studies show that there is no quality without quantity. That most of the people who contributed something to science were people who wrote a lot of papers. Some of them just stayed in their drawers. But there may be people who we can think of as people who wrote a limited number of revolutionary papers like Albert Einstein. But the fact is that Einstein worked all the time, wrote a lot of things, but decided to publish only some of them. In philosophy, such an example is Ludwig Wittgenstein. He published only 2 things during his lifetime, but the number of things that he wrote, the discussions he had, was huge. And the studies really show the more time you spend on generating new ideas, the more time you spend on writing new papers, even if you don't publish them, the more likely it becomes that you will really contribute something interesting. So it's like in this famous song that it is like love and marriage, which come together as a horse and carriage. Yeah, that was it. So it's like with quantity and quality. So you cannot have one without the other. You will not be a creative, high quality scientist or anyone else in any other discipline or sphere of experience without doing a lot of things. But this only shows that one needs enough variation for selection to do its work. A Nobel Prize winner, Vernon Maxwell, a Nobel Prize winner in economics, introduced an interesting distinction between the so-called constructive and ecological rationality. He says, in cultural and biological coevolution, order arises from mechanisms for generating variation to which is applied mechanisms for selection. Reason is good at providing variation, but poor at selection. That is constructivism, what is accompanied with reason, is a powerful engine for generating variation, but it is far too narrowly limited and inflexible in its ability to comprehend and apply all the relevant facts in order to serve the process of selection, which is better left to ecological processes. So what he says, in effect, is even when we speak of rationality, we can speak of two phases of rationality. One is constructive, so it provides variation. It is making mistakes in a rational way with the use of different methods we have. Mistakes because we deviate from the already established behavioral patterns. And we must create a lot of it in order for what Smith calls ecological rationality to make the selection. So we may see what works in practice, but in order to find a good solution to a problem, we need to generate lots and lots of possible solutions. The first thing, the variation, is something we do with our reason, but working in a strange way, because a reason making mistakes, so deviating from the established behavioral patterns. And then what is selected as a good solution is yet another story. My final question, in the context of what I've said today, what universities are for? We would like to see universities as a space for innovation, for generating new ideas, for creativity. But in the context of what I have said so far, it means that universities are spaces for generating variation. And if so, universities are spaces for making mistakes, for committing errors. Meanwhile, when I think of university today, I think of a place where impact factor is the measure of originality. Popular opinion constitutes not the final, but the initial judge in research endeavors. Incremental progress is always preferred over bold hypothesis. I don't know whether you recognize our universities in this, but I'm afraid I do. Quality assurance, this is something I love. A part of what universities do is to make mistakes. Can we assure the quality of making? I can understand quality assurance when it comes to the production of bricks, but not necessarily when it comes to generating conscious or unconscious mistakes, which may lead to groundbreaking discoveries. So quality assurance and administrative burdens become as important and consume as much time as energy as tackling genuine scientific problems. Efficiency in developing solutions to technological or social challenges is the sole criterion of success. I'm not saying that universities should not, in a large part, be places which are efficient, which work according to the established methods and patterns, and so. But there must be a space in which we should be able to make meaningful mistakes. And when I look at today's universities, there is this space is just smaller and smaller with every new regulation, every new grant program, and so on and so on. So this is something with which I would like to end. But before doing that, the person in the picture, I've lost him, sorry. But you saw him for a moment. His name was Jerzy Panek. He was one of the greatest Polish artists of the second part of the 20th century. And most of the sketches that you show were by Jerzy Panek. And I think Panek is a great example of a person who did great things by making a lot of mistakes. I saw a lot of his notebooks when he just sketched the initial. Oh, sorry for that. But these are all okay. These were all Panek's works. Not this one, but this one. A great example of how making mistakes may make a real contribution to culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Bartosz, for this, well, difficult but enlightening lecture. Let me comment that I am I am confirmed in my view that physics is much simpler than philosophy. Well, please, the talk is open for discussion. I am sure there are many questions. Please be bold and try to make mistakes, asking Bartosz some questions. Who would like to state something? Well, okay, please.
Hello, do you hear me? I'd like to talk about how we can succeed after we make mistakes and fail, how we can not to repeat this mistake if we write books and articles, how we can make sure that our books and article will be very well, and how we can succeed in life even that we made mistake. But we want to refrain from it. We want to succeed and go far. How not to be disappointed, not to be frustrated. Like Timur-Lenk from Mongolia was frustrated and he learned from the insects that shouldn't be frustrated. What do you think about Timur-Lenk and his wisdom? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know whether I understood the entire question, but I hope I did. So I think that, like I said, with rationality, it's very difficult to be rational because it is very difficult, on the one hand, not to become a foundationalist, so someone who believes in unshakable foundation and looking for it all the time. But on the other hand, to be rational means not to accept that everything is equally good. So we are somewhere in between. And the same happens here. So we will not contribute or create something meaningful and new if we just repeat so if we commit no errors and no mistakes. So if we do not deviate from the established patterns. But then it doesn't mean that every error will lead to something new, which is at the same time useful. In most cases, it will not. So our problem is that we may have a lot of variation. We can commit a lot of errors which are completely unacceptable. One thing I did not address in this lecture is that there are some mechanisms which can help us to filter out mistakes which are obviously not acceptable. So when for instance, I don't know, there is a new observation in physics. Right now, it's almost impossible. But let's imagine that it's the beginning, the first 20 years of the 20th century. A lot of new experimental data coming in, and there were some theories explaining the already existing data, but new observations led to an obvious realization that there may be something wrong with the theories we had till then. So what you need to do is to make a mistake in the sense that you cannot repeat the old theory. You need to change something in this theory. The question is whether any solution is or any mistake, any change in the received wisdom, received behavioral pattern is acceptable, and it is not. So, for instance, when we in science we have methodologies, for instance, and so if this is a kind of filter that helps us to establish that some of the solutions are surely not, or some mistakes that we commit are surely something that we should just get rid of. But there is still a number of possibilities, and only time can tell which of those mistakes are really meaningful, that, for instance, they will become the new behavioral patterns that will constitute, at least for some time, the current scientific knowledge in this case. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, please. First lady in the... Yeah.
Thank you so much. So my question was, how do we make a difference between a productive failure and a sign that we should change the direction?
Okay, I think that there are two ways of understanding failure. The first one is that we fail to do something which is accepted in our community as an established way of doing things. And without this kind of failure, there will be no progress. And this is my main claim today. So really, in order to do something new, we have to have the courage to do something which has which is not typical for our community. It may be, you know, a national community, a community of scientists, or, you know, there are different communities, but without the courage and the strength to do something which is not typically done in our community, there will be nothing new. And as I said, there are powerful mental forces which make it almost impossible not to follow what others do. So this is difficult. Now, the other kind of failure we can speak of is that when we propose something new, so we have already committed the mistake of the first type. We already deviated from the typical ways of doing things in our community. The second type of failure may be that, well, this will not be useful. So the fact that we committed the first mistake will turn out useless, really. But this is something we can do little about. We need to try, and this is the reason I said that quality is impossible without quantity. So we have to try a lot of those deviations in order to have a chance to stumble upon one which will be meaningful and will not constitute a failure in the second sense of the word. I'm not sure whether it's now I stopped understanding myself.
try and miss, by some kind of, please, there was a next question, please, man. Yes, then the next.
Thank you for the inspiring lecture. So I am a person who highly depends on a public opinion. Unfortunately, I'm trying to fix it. But short question to you. Do you believe in mistakes that are unfixable and no longer allow you to create something in your current society due to external constraints that are no longer influenced by you, but are influenced by your previous mistake?
I will answer from the point of view of biology. Yes, these are the so-called fatal mistakes. These are the mistakes that when you just die. Lethal, that's the better word. If all other mistakes are fixable in the sense that when you make a mistake, you can, if you are still alive, then you can just keep trying, making other mistakes which may turn out more useful or meaningful.
All right, lady, please.
Hello. Thank you very much for a really exciting talk. So this week, we, in the Una Europa week, we are exploring AI. And this is something that is, by definition, unable to make mistakes. So, well, I'm hallucinations, but it repeats patterns. How can we make sure that we can utilize AI as a force for cultural generation rather than as a source of cultural ossification?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this is an interesting question. So I think that you should distinguish between two things. The first is the mechanism behind AI algorithms, and the other is, let's say, all the ethical issues which may be connected with it. the interesting thing is that when you think of the mechanism behind AI algorithms, it really is more or less what I've been talking of. It works a bit differently, but you have huge data sets. There is a problem, a prompt that you give to the algorithm, and the algorithm uses establishes what is the highest probability of, you know, when you are looking for an answer, you have what is the highest what is the word which has the highest probability appearing after this prompt is there, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next. So in a way, what AI algorithms do is that they are based on the entirety of the cultural efforts that are somewhere embedded in the data sets we have at our disposal right now at the internet. These are huge data sets. And this leads me to a suggestion that AI may easily take over when it comes to what sometimes is referred to as mass culture. So if we think of producing a typical crime story book or a typical adventure movie or something like that, I believe that if not already, those algorithms will be quite good at doing it at a high level very quickly. However, this is a subtle question. The question is whether there is a sphere in which AI algorithms will not be as good as human beings. And here the suggestion is that when it comes to, now the definitional problem will arise, the high culture. So high culture may be defined as a culture which deviates a lot from the established. So when you think of, you know, poems which are written in a completely different way than the poems in the past, or pictures which are you know, paintings which are done in a completely different fashion than in the previous period, and so on and so on. So if this establishes the high culture, it will be difficult for AI algorithms to come up with this, because they are based on the statistical analysis of the existing data. So in a way, I sometimes claim that the arrival of the AI algorithms is at the same time the new beginning for, or the reappearance of high culture, because maybe this may be interesting in the context of what universities should do, because I think that AI algorithms will be quite good at typical teaching activities, or doing typical research which requires going over a large data sets and so on and so on. But maybe there are spaces where the meaningful mistakes we need to do in order to have some progress are of this kind that an algorithm cannot do it, because they too much deviate from the behavioral patterns we have. So this is when it comes to the mechanism. The other question I do not really know how to reply to is the ethical dimension of using AI algorithms. There are so many issues involved here that we would probably need to concentrate on a particular issue. So I'm not sure whether this is a good time and place to discuss this aspect. It's not strictly connected to the lecture. Anyway.
Thank you for this reply. Yes, the last question may be on the top. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for the ability to ask the question. I wanted to ask, because you mentioned that mistakes and errors are intrinsical to the process of creating new things, basically, and that there is no quality without quantity in the process. And this discussion included both the sciences and the arts at least implicitly in the discussion of culture. And I had this reflection, especially, I have a more or less direct quote from when you ended the speech that here are some here are Panek sketches / graphics, which are examples of how mistakes can benefit culture. And my question is, can we really speak of mistakes in arts where it's an inherently subjective process of creation? I mean, I can see, at least in my perception of art, that you definitely can fail, for instance, to make a play or a movie or a painting, but generally speaking, is there such a thing as a mistake in the process of artistic creation? And how would we differentiate a mistake in arts and the sciences? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. This is a very interesting question. I think I would like to answer in two short parts. The first is not a direct reply to your question, but a more general observation. I think that there is very small difference, if any, between the cognitive activities of an artist, of a scientist, of someone who just wants to solve a simple problem of what to wear for a party organized by a colleague the next day. In all cases, our thinking, some kind of creative process is initiated by a problem we encounter. We can encounter a problem, I don't know what to wear because I don't know what other people will be wearing, whether this is a very formal event and you need this type of stupid thing on you, or you can have, if you are a physicist, you also encounter a problem. So there is a kind of incompatibility between the existing theories and the interpretation of some current experiments. But in art, you also encounter problems. You may not see it by looking at the paintings or pictures, but just look at what people say in their memoirs, for instance, the famous painters. Or if you are interested in the history of art, there is a beautiful history of art written by Gombrich. He was a friend of Karl Popper, the philosopher of science, and he tried to show that history of art also works like science does. So we have problems, we solve the problems, but our solutions generate new problems. So for instance, when he speaks of Cézanne, he speaks of someone who was doing his work after the Impressionists did their revolution. And the problem Cézanne encountered was how to combine, on the one hand, the things that were gained by Impressionists, the representation of light and color, that was what they contributed to art, but at the same time, how to combine it with the achievements of the previous periods, when you had a lot of So the composition of the painting was an important aspect, and a lot of things were done. So Cézanne had a problem of how to combine the two. And so what I want to say is that there is no, from a certain perspective, there is no big difference between what scientists do, what artists do when it comes to the way they think about their work, because they all want to solve problems they encounter. And the final sentence is, when I was speaking about making mistakes, I was not speaking about mistake understood as something which is not useful. So we do something which is not useful. When I was speaking of errors or mistakes, I was speaking of deviating from the established behavioral patterns. So for instance, Panek, in doing his artwork, had to violate a lot of rules that were typical of, for his teachers, in his school, for previous artists. In this sense, these were mistakes because he deviated from what was a typical way of doing this type of artwork before him. Yeah, thank you.
So it's my privilege to give the last word. Maybe you allow me, Bartosz. Yeah, so I think that also to that question, that well, as a scientist in my time as physicist, well, I was looking for always quantities which are non-existing according to theory, just looking at it. And then when you apply a certain method, of course, when you try to measure zero, there are many disturbances. So in the scientific method, you introduce artificially errors or mistake or larger scale disturbances just to trace what the effect would be. And in the art, I think that it's not the theory, it's trying to express something well, to express oneself, one's thoughts. And then artists look to, well, do it in another way. This is this disturbance, okay? Would you agree that this is then the finding new way of telling something, well, something important?
I do not like this idea of artists working to express themselves. This means
no expressing well.
But physicists also express themselves.
Yes.
Different physicists, for instance, have different. When you compare, I don't know, Feynman with Schwinger. So they did the same in quantum electrodynamics. I mean, they arrive at the same conclusions, but through completely different ways. In Schwinger's case, it was very thorough calculations, just working through without even imagining the physical processes, almost impossible to imagine. And Feynman did it through a completely. So in a way, he also expressed himself in one way or another, or they express themselves in their work. And of course, in art, you do express yourself. But if we put emphasis on the expression part or the emotions that are somehow find their way into the artwork, we are becoming blind on a more important thing, which I believe is this sequence of problems and solutions. This also happens in art. That a school of, I don't know, painting works within a certain tradition, a certain paradigm. And at some point, there are so many things that we don't like there. There are problems that we want to solve. We change the paradigm. We go in a different direction. So I think that similarities here are more important. So anyway, there is much more to art than expressing oneself.
Okay, of course, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for being at the lecture. I think the Bartosz deserves one more round of applause. Thank you for attending the lecture. I think you have all many things to think over. And even with these difficulties, I think in communicating with Bartosz, if there is urgent idea of expressing or exchanging the views on making errors, Bartosz is open for questions also. Thank you very much.